It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. My CEO guest today is Arman Sadeghi. Arman's a business coach, author, keynote speaker, and entrepreneur, and his education includes attending the University of California at Berkeley, earning a bachelor's degree in molecular and cell biology, as well as attending Harvard Medical School. He's a serial entrepreneur who started his first company in his parents' garage at the ripe age of 15 by teaching himself how to set up and maximize computer networks in the early 90s. Currently, Arman owns and operates 6 different companies in various industries, including IT, data security, business consulting, marketing, photography, and more. Arman Sadeghi, welcome into the corner office.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Brant. I appreciate it.
It's great to have you here. And, we talked a few weeks ago about your amazing career, and I'm so excited about hearing, some of the tidbits that you can share with our audience, some of the businesses that you've set up and been successful with, and how that's kind of evolved over years. But let's start a little bit with your early years. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and, what your early family life was like.
Yeah, so I grew up in Southern California ever since I was about 9 years old. I actually was born in Iran, and then my family moved to Southern California, and I've pretty much been here for most of my life since, other than going away for school to a couple different places.
Was that at the diaspora at the time of the Shah's decline, or when?
Yeah, it was right around that time that my family moved. Yes.
And was your family successful in business there? Were they in education? What was your father and mother's profession in Iran?
Yeah, so my mom and dad were both somewhat entrepreneurial, but my dad was in the military. So they started as a business together. And so I grew up with seeing sort of a side business as my dad was doing his military stuff and things like that. So I got to experience both the typical life of a military kid, and then what it's like to kind of have entrepreneurs as parents.
And do you remember those early days in Iran?
I do. Yeah. I was there until I was about 9. So, sure. Certainly a few years of it, I remember.
Yeah. Well, the country certainly transformed a bit over the years, hasn't it?
It definitely has. Yeah. Yes, it has.
And then what did dad and mom do once they immigrated to the U.S.? Was it kind of a start over sequence for them?
It absolutely was. Yeah. So, really a few very, very rough years as they attempted to adjust into the culture. And, for me going to school, not speaking a word of English and really having to sort of figure it out myself because my parents were so overwhelmed.
Of course, you didn't have any English education, I'm sure, in Iranian school, correct? Probably French.
There actually is some. My sisters, but I was too young, so it hadn't clicked in for me yet. But my sisters had it already.
How many older sisters do you have?
I have 2 older sisters.
2 older sisters, cool.
Yeah.
And
I learned a lot from them.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you kind of went to school cold, right? Gosh, that first day must have been pretty traumatic.
Oh my gosh, it was one of the toughest experiences you can imagine. Showing up to school, literally speaking, maybe a few words of English, and that's it, and not having any clue where to go or what to do. But it was the first year was really rough, and then by the second year, I was speaking really well. By my by the end of my second year in the U.S., I was speaking English fluently, and to the point that people assumed that I was born and raised here.
Isn't that amazing? so quick. It's if we could all learn multiple languages young, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, exactly.
Tell me about some of the inspiring things that mom and dad, taught you or that you observed in those early years.
Yeah, I had a very unique childhood in that I had two role models who were so incredibly different in my mom and dad. But I got this combination of what they taught me. My dad is to this day is a massive inspiration to me because he's just a master with his words. He'll to this day in my mid 40s, my dad will come over to my house and find out something I'm struggling with personally, business, whatever it may be. And he'll just say these words that are so inspirational. And, and just the other day he was talking to me and it was, he left and I thought to myself, gosh, how lucky was I to have this guy around every day growing up.
Awesome.
And then my mom, on the other hand, is not much of a talker, but the action is incredible. When we moved to the US, the only sort of the art my mom had that she could pursue and make money at doing is she was a seamstress. Oh. And so she started doing alterations work and things like that. And there were times where we were financially struggling, really, really struggling. And I would see my mom work 2 full-time jobs and have her wake up in the morning, get us ready for school. And of course, we were kids. We didn't understand. So we would yell and scream and do all the crazy things that kids do. And my poor mom would, make us breakfast and we'd complain about what she made us for breakfast. And then she'd get up and go to her first job and then go to her second job. And then get home after her second job and still make dinner for the family. Wow. I mean, just incredible things.
What a motivation.
From my mom, I learned, what hard work looks like and to not be scared of working hard. And I think that was a big part of what made me who I am today.
That's awesome. And what kind of work did Dad do? Did he continue in his entrepreneurial profession?
Well, once we came here, that he was being in the military. Of course, that doesn't translate over.
Yeah,
right.
Unfortunately, right.
And then the business stuff that they were doing there doesn't necessarily translate over because of the language barrier and things like that. So he had to sort of do the same thing and work his way back up and got into some entrepreneurial things, but eventually got into some businesses with my mom and family and they made it work, but gosh, those few years were pretty tough.
I can imagine. Were older sisters pretty inspirational for you too? Did they help you with language learning? And what do you remember from those days?
I mean, they used to beat up on me a lot.
I have 2 older brothers, so I can identify with that.
Well, let me tell you, I learned to have a lot of respect for women because they would. I always tell the story of how they beat up on me my entire childhood. And one day, I forget, I was probably about, 12 years old or something. And finally, or maybe even 14, I had just started to sort of get some strength as a boy. And I was starting to get some height on me and some weight on me. So finally I was almost as big as they were. And there was this one time we had a fight and they double teamed me like they always do. And for the first time in my life, I was able to overpower them where they couldn't beat up on me.
I love it.
And so as soon as that fight happened, my dad pulls me aside. He says, "Son, I have to have a talk with you." And he pulls me aside and he's like, "Men don't hit women." Oh, wow. And I thought, are you kidding me? They've been beating up on me for 12 or whatever years. And finally the day I get the upper hand. Now you tell me the men don't hit women. But so great. It was interesting, but I'll tell you to this day, growing up with 2 sisters who were both very intelligent, very hardworking. One is now a doctor. Wow. One is an attorney. Both really amazing women. And it taught me to have respect for women in a way that I think a lot of people just aren't exposed to. Yeah. And it shows in my businesses. In many of my businesses, some of my highest ranking executives who I hire are women. And not that should be a surprise to anybody, but I probably have a disproportionate number of high ranking females in my organizations. And it's because I interview these people and I'm, all I can see is I see my mom, I see my 2 sisters and, and not that my dad was a slacker or anything. He was a great thing. He was great at all this stuff too, but it was kind of like from Dad, I expected it. Whereas from my mom and sisters, it It was an amazing experience.
I'm sure that's added a lot to your success, which doesn't surprise me. Back to your school years, once you kind of mastered the language, were you a good student?
Was I a good student? Yeah. Oh man, that's a good one. No, I was actually a terrible student. I had probably a 2.0 GPA.
Oh, wow.
For most of my schooling, and the only reason I had a 2.0 was because that's what I needed to maintain to stay on the basketball and football team.
Right.
So no, the only subject that always came easy to me was math. Mm-hmm. And so consistently I was getting A's in math, and really without trying much, but with all the other subjects, they were difficult, and I struggled. And finally, my junior year of high school, after finishing my first semester, my junior year, I had a 0.0 grade point average.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, straight F's.
You have to really work hard to do that. You know that, right?
It is not easy, let me tell you, because one of those classes, I believe, was like music, and one of them was the PE, and it's really hard to fail those classes. So, but the reason that happened is because I early in my junior year actually started my own company. And so I started a business, and it took all my focus, and I never enjoyed school. And so it was a school just became this secondary thing, and I was doing really well. So I actually dropped out of high school halfway through my junior year to pursue my business full time.
Tell us about that first business. What was it?
Yeah, so I started a sort of an IT consulting company. Now, keep in mind, this is the early 90s.
Yeah.
And so the internet was, it was born, but not really. No one knew about the internet. And
LexisNexis and code, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I was setting up networks for doctors' offices, law offices, and stuff like that, and really doing some pretty interesting stuff. And it was a huge success. I did exceptionally well, and I was really fortunate to have had that first sort of entrepreneurial thing. But
was it profitable?
It was profitable, absolutely, yeah. So
did you hire other people, or was it more of a one-man single shingle type of an?
No, I did hire a few people.
Wow.
And I actually, by the time I was about a little over 16 years old, I moved out of my parents' house. I got my own apartment and a nice car and this and that. And so, from as far as I could tell, I had made it. And, nowadays looking back, I wasn't making as much money as it felt like then, but I was, wealthy beyond anything I could have imagined at the time.
Right. But you went back to school, right? I think you went to Cal Berkeley and
I did.
Got a bachelor's degree. So what made you kind of go down that path, and when was that?
Yeah, so a few years into it, just as my friends were graduating high school, or my old schoolmates had graduated high school, it started to really bother me that I had never gotten an education. And I had the money, I had the success, but I felt really unfulfilled. And it was one of those times in my life where I learned some very valuable lessons. And feeling unfulfilled, I decided I was going to do something about it. And I made a decision that I was going to go back to school and pursue getting my degree. And I was never scared of what I would do to make money. So I sold the business, and I was able to go back to school, gave everything up. Moved back into my parents' house.
Wow. What age were you at that stage?
I believe I was somewhere around maybe 19, 20 maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 19 or 20. Yeah. And I went and registered myself at a community college. Yeah. Put in the time there, worked really hard, got a degree in or studied biology and chemistry. And because I've always had a love for the sciences. And I didn't want to go the computer science route. I've always liked to sort of expand my knowledge. So I decided to go a different route and go for sort of towards medicine and things like that.
Right.
And got my way, got a 4.0 at the community college, and then got my way into UC Berkeley, which was my dream school. One of my two dream schools that I'd always wanted to go to most of my life.
So tell me why Berkeley was one of your dream schools, Arman.
It's just growing up in California. It was the number one rated public school.
Yeah.
And just a lot of history there, a lot of Nobel laureates, beautiful campus.
Fun place to live too.
Yeah, exactly. And just a history of great academics. And so I wanted to be a part of that.
So molecular and cell biology, and I think you went on to attend Harvard, med school. Tell us a little bit about that. What made you choose to kind of go from the entrepreneurial path down, a medicine road?
Well, I'm at heart, I'm a scientist. I have to say, so I'm a businessman and a scientist. I think part of my success in business, both as a business owner, but also when I have been an employee, my success has come from the fact that I take a scientific approach to everything I do.
Right.
So it's not really far-fetched for me to have gone down that path. But, it also allowed me to sort of touch three very different areas. One is IT, computers, software, things like that. Another one being business, and then another one being medicine. And so to this day, I think it was one of the best decisions I made. And I had an incredible experience surrounded by some of the most amazing human beings I've ever met.
Yeah.
And really enjoyed the process of learning and understanding the human body, human mind, and all of that. And at the same time, having all the knowledge that I carried in with me.
And you went on to med school, but I understand, did you go on and get your degree there?
No. So about halfway through, I decided I wanted to, for personal and professional reasons, I decided to leave. But it wasn't because I didn't love medical school. I loved it and I was doing extremely well. But there was other circumstances going on. I had just gotten married right before going off to med school and a few other things. And so it made sense to move back to Southern California.
Got it. And so then what did you do at that stage? Did you start another business right away?
Yeah. So I was, at one point I was about to start a business, and I got called by an uncle of mine who owned a wireless company.
Oh.
And he said, hey, I really need someone to help me with some of my IT stuff. And, him remembering my history.
You had the reputation, right?
Yeah. So I said, sure. What do you need? And he needed me to come in and do sort of a turnaround on an IT department. And so he hired me to come in. It was supposed to be a project. The project turned into a position. And, I worked my way up to become the director of IT. Oh. And then, from there, just typical of what Arman does, decided I wanted to take this huge leap because the company was struggling in sales. Right. And I said, let me take over the sales. And I made the suggestion of making me director of sales. And he sort of laughed at me and said, what do you know about sales, kid? And I said, well, let me prove it to you. And so I took a massive pay cut to go from being director of IT to becoming a regional sales manager.
Wow.
For 12 retail locations. And again,
was he a cell phone wireless franchise? Is that what?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so the company had over 200 stores. And so I took over managing 12 of them. And then from 12, I was promoted to run 30 of them. And then from 30, went up to a regional, or we called it a regional manager, a territory manager.
Right.
And then from there, went on to eventually become the director of sales for the company.
Nice.
And it was a great experience to have that growth. And again, to get to experience not only the IT side, but then really getting into sales and retail and understanding that at a completely different level.
Yeah. Do you remember the first time you started managing people?
I do. Absolutely. I'd say, I think the very first time was back when I started my first company.
Yeah. Right.
I think, the way I think about it this way, I think of that first time that I had that department full of people at the wireless company. I think that's where I really got my first taste of truly managing a reasonable size team of people.
And I'm sure a lot of people who are much older than you too, I imagine.
Absolutely. In a lot of cases, that was the case. Yeah.
What were some of the challenges you had during that period?
It was understanding that at the end of the day, it was about getting the result I was after, and not about my ego, not about me, not about, my ideals, but instead there was a result I was after. So whether I was managing the IT department or the sales department, there were things I was trying to get done. And what I learned that was probably the most valuable lesson I learned, and I use it to this day in business, was that, but it was a tough lesson to learn, was that it's your employees aren't necessarily going to fit into the mold that you want them to fit into. So it's your job to adapt to them. It's easy when you're the boss to think, well, everyone needs to adapt to me. But really, it's the other way around. For the best managers I know in the world, is they're able to adapt to deal with each individual differently. Now, we can give everyone personality tests, scores, and this and that, and teach them how to work with us. And sure, that might work. And I've tried that in the past. But what works better is, if I'm so good at management, well, then I should be able to adapt to their style. And so, I learned that's how I got the best results. And so I adapted, and when I adapted, I started getting the results I wanted. And suddenly I didn't care that I wasn't doing it the way I wanted to, because the results are what I ultimately wanted.
That's a great lesson. And, the earlier you learn that in the career, the better. And it sounds like you learned that very early on.
I did. I was very fortunate.
Yeah. How would you say your leadership styles evolved over time?
I think as I've gotten older, the one big thing I've learned is to stop trying to make so many decisions and to really empower my team to make decisions.
Yeah.
I remember I hired someone as a consultant about 12 years ago, and he came in and he said, you need to put a sign up behind your desk that says, I don't make decisions. And at the time, I thought, gosh, this is horrible advice. I was like, this guy's a smart guy, and, I'm paying him a lot of money, but gosh, that's one terrible piece of advice I'm not going to follow. And I remember he would repeat that every once in a while. And it never clicked for me because my job, right? If you were to really look at what I did day in and day out in this case, a CEO, but even when I was a director of sales or whatever, really the job title on my card should have been decision maker, because that's what I did. I made decisions. I was really good at making decisions. People would bring me problems and I'd say, here's the decision, and what's interesting is at the time it didn't connect with me, but over the years I learned that was probably the best advice I ever got. And I just didn't know it. Because when I finally made that shift, and it happened over many years, I realized that what it comes down to is you hire people for the purpose of making decisions.
That's right.
Now, you want them to make good decisions. The problem I had before was I would either delegate and forget about it, right? Or I would say, well, they can't do it anyway, so I'm just going to figure it out myself.
Right.
So if someone came to me and said, hey, what do you think we should do about this? So let's say it was a marketing thing, and someone said, how much money do you think we should invest in this marketing campaign? Well, I would ask them questions, and then I would tell them the answer, right? Or at least what I thought was the answer.
Right.
But what I've realized now is to ask, well, what do you think? What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
And then I say, nowadays, people who've worked for me for a long time know to not try to get me to make their decisions for them, but they know that what I expect is a recommendation, right? So give me the facts and a recommendation, and I'll look at that recommendation. If it's something that needs to come to me, now in a lot of cases it doesn't even need to come to me, but I'll look at your recommendation and either say yes or say, no, you need to go rework that, right? So don't come to me and say, what do you think the marketing budget should be? Come to me and say, Arman, I believe that for this particular trade show, a marketing budget of $15,000 will work. And the reason I think that is because of this, and this.
Right.
What are your thoughts? Or do I have your permission or approval to move forward with this?
Yeah.
See, that's the kind of employee that I know is going to eventually get to the point where they don't need me anymore, because what I can do is I can give them guidance so that they can make the right decision, and they own the decision. So if I give them a budget of 10,000 and it's not enough, well, they're the ones who set 10,000. Even if they started at 20 and I worked them down to 10, it doesn't matter. In the end, it's their decision, right? And so I've learned that when you treat employees that way, in the short term, it's a lot of work, because it would be so much easier to just answer it for them. But in the long term, they stop coming to you for the same questions.
Yeah.
And in the long term, they get empowered. And your most talented people are much more likely to stay with you when they're being treated in that way.
Yeah. That's great advice. And again, another thing to learn early on in your career. Very, very helpful. Thinking about some of the bosses you've had in the past, obviously when you came to your uncle's operation in wireless, you had people that you worked for. Share with us some of the best or frankly, some of the worst lessons you've learned over time from those bosses. You don't have to mention any names, Arman, but, I know from my own experience, sometimes you observe behaviors and go, man, I'm never going to do that. And that's sometimes a very valuable lesson.
Yeah. I'd have to say I'm blessed that I've had really good bosses for almost every position I've ever been in. And often as a business owner and with the fact that I do business consulting and being an advisor and things like that these days, sometimes my customers are like my boss. Or let's say a board of directors puts me in place at a company as an interim CEO. Well, then they become my boss. And so to this day, I still have bosses, although not in that corporate structure kind of way.
So true.
And so, what I've seen that I like the best are bosses who judge me by the numbers and the results. The ones who are far less concerned with how I'm doing something and much more concerned with what result I'm getting.
Yeah.
When people start to question my methods, especially in the middle of something, I don't do well with it. And the other thing is when people start to question the methods when the results are already there, that's the one that really bothers me. If I'm getting results and I'm not breaking the law, I'm not breaking company policy, I'm not doing anything that goes against morals and values and things like that, I don't like to have my methods questioned because I find that disempowers you. And in my own management, I make a big effort to not judge people by the way they go about doing something, but rather the result that they get. And I tell my employees, my top level management, I always tell them, I say, here's the thing with working with me is I'm going to judge you by the numbers. I am going to judge you by the results. Now, if you're getting results, I don't care how you do it. I don't care what methods you use. Don't break the law. Don't, all that stuff. But I'm not going to question your method. However, God forbid the day you're not getting the results, because then I am going to micromanage you like you wouldn't believe, right? And I'm going to get
jump in the sandbox. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. I'm jumping in with you, and now you're going to have to deal with me. And trust me, it's not fun to deal with me. So you need to get the results, and of course you have to make the results clear. So that's the other thing is I've had bosses who are great bosses where they tell me, what exactly is expected of me, right? And there's no sort of like side agreements where they don't tell you that one of the ways you're being judged is, I don't know, how early you arrive to work, or something else that they haven't told you, or how you dress. It's like, look, if you value me arriving early, being dressed professionally and hitting certain numbers, well, tell me those things and I will accomplish them. But if the expectations are not set, and again, going back to me being a math guy, I like expectations to be set with numbers everywhere possible.
Right.
And so it's the way that I work, and the best managers I've seen definitely have had those qualities.
Awesome. Listen, I want to get up to where you're doing today, but before when you and I spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, you had a kind of an interesting foray into the recycling area with All Green Electronics Recycling, which is a company I understand that is still running today. And tell us a little bit about your inspiration for that back in 2007, 2008, and how you kind of got engaged with that and where that business is today.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it was my first big entrepreneurial venture since after medical school. And I was told about this TV show on 60 Minutes about this thing where electronic waste was being dumped into landfills and destroying the environment. And having been a kid who went to school at Berkeley, and being what I like to call myself a tree hugger, so I saw that and I thought, gosh, look at this. Here's something that takes the environment and combines it with the IT world. And then getting into realizing how, as I started doing some research, it was even more interesting than I thought, because a big part of all of this was data security and the theft of intellectual property and so many other things that go along with that. And so I fell in love with the concept. And so I decided to launch this business with very small investment and really just getting in myself and building it from the ground up. Really, really, really hard work. 7 days a week, 16-hour days. To get the company going. And so today it's been around for about 12 years. It does extremely well. I'm not involved with the day-to-day operations anymore, although I'm still the CEO. But as with my 5 other companies that I own, I've gotten them all except for the one that I'm actively involved in every day, which is my coaching. I've gotten all of them to the point where the people in charge are the ones running the company, right? So my director of sales runs sales. My director of operations runs operations. My CFO handles the finances. And it's not that I'm blind to it. In fact, I get key performance indicators, KPIs, coming to my cell phone via text message every single day from every single one of my high-level directors in every single one of my own companies. And in fact, I'm CC'd on KPIs for about 10 to 12 different companies that I'm also an advisor for. And so I've developed these systems of using KPIs to manage the ins and outs of all these businesses. And so that's how with the recycling company, as big as it is, I'm able to be hands off for the most part, because at any moment, if anything is not exactly where it should be, I see it in the numbers and I react accordingly.
That's awesome. So what are some of the key performance indicators or KPIs that you do track? What are the most salient ones?
Yeah, it's interesting because when you look at people talk about KPIs, a lot of times, I'll ask when I go to be an advisor for a new company, I'll say, well, we have to implement KPIs. And they say, oh, yeah, we already have KPIs. And then when I ask them what those KPIs are, typically they're very big picture things that are being tracked, first of all, maybe on a monthly basis. But even that, when you ask the CEO or they ask the manager of the department, let's say, for example, there's someone who manages a call center, is a director of some sort of a call center with 50 employees. And they say, oh, we track KPIs all the time. And I say, okay, well, what's one of your KPIs? And maybe they say it's, the time you spend on a call on average, right? Or the number of calls per day that you make, if it's cold calling, outbound cold calls. So my question would be to turn to the manager and say, okay, yesterday, who was your number one performer? Or on average for this month, where 10 days in the month, 15 days in the month, on average, what's the length of your calls? And if they have to go to a resource like a piece of paper or their email or their phone to get the data, then I know they don't truly have KPIs.
Right.
Because if you think about personal KPIs, some of your personal KPIs are things like your weight. Your height doesn't change much these days, right? When you're grown up, but at one point it did. Or the greatest KPI dashboard ever created is your car's KPI dashboard, which shows you your speed, your RPMs, and whether your car's overheated and things like that. And if you think about it, if you are driving your car on the freeway and I cover up your dashboard and I say, how fast are you going? You're not going to be able to tell me exactly how fast you're going, but you're going to say, I think I'm going between 70 and 75. Now, maybe you're going 68, maybe you're going 77. But if you tell me you're going 75, trust me, you're not going 42 miles an hour and you're not going 100, right? Whereas when I ask the same question of most CEOs or high-level executives of companies, and I question them on their key KPIs, they are off by a factor that would be the equivalent of driving your car at 70. And I say, how fast are you going? And you say 200 miles an hour or 22 miles an hour, right? And so what you realize is that they sort of have KPIs, but it's not KPIs that they're using on a day-to-day basis to run their business or run their department. And that's where the biggest difference comes in. And so in all of my companies, I have those, and I know you asked for specifics. So let's take, for example, one of my companies is we do data destruction. That's all it specializes in, data security. And so for that one, it's a very simple type of business where we have leads that come in from our various marketing efforts, and it's companies who are looking to have hard drives shredded or wiped, right? And so we track the number of leads we've received in any given day, right? Then we track the number of conversions in any given day, and then we track the dollar amount of the sales in any given day, right? And those three are going to be our key performance indicators for our sales department. Now, we may track other things, and we do, trust me, but at the CEO level, for that company from a sales perspective, all I care about is how many leads did we get? How many did we convert? And what was the total value of the conversions, the dollar amounts? Right. Now, if I get a number like they say, well, we received 50 leads and we converted 4 leads. Okay, this is where now as a CEO, I do what's called a dig here. They immediately get a response back from me via text message, and it says, give me the breakdown by salesperson, or give me the breakdown of what happened with those 46 other calls or whatever the numbers work out to. I forget what I said, but it's that type of thing. And because they're tracking it, they better be tracking it, right? So when they send it to me, if everything looks good, again, I'm not going to question the details, but the minute something is off, now I question everything. And I can dig in deeper. And
if one number is wrong. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Time to look at more.
And and I have a lot of KPIs in various companies that are like the light on your car that shows when your engine is overheated.
Right.
See, your car doesn't, every day you get in, your car doesn't tell you, doesn't have this big display that shows the temperature of your engine, because frankly, most of us don't care and wouldn't even know what to do with that information anyways, right? When we need that light is when something goes wrong, the car's overheating or something's going on, and it's a red light that goes on. And, so with KPIs, it's much the same, where sometimes you need something that's like a gas gauge, correct? And it just shows you where your gas is at. So when you want to know, you look down and you go, oh, okay, I have about a half tank. And then you don't look at it again for a day. Right. And then sometimes that gas gauge gets so low that a little red light goes on. And then if your car is one of these fancy ones, hey, if it gets a little bit lower, now it starts beeping at you, right? If it's really fancy, maybe it's got a display that tells you you're low on fuel, or tells you how many miles you have before you run out of gas. Now, I have an all-electric household. We have nothing but Teslas in my house, but same thing applies to battery life. It's those kinds of KPIs that make the best managers in the world be able to be the best managers in the world, and allow you to be able to manage your team without being in every single detail of what they do.
You mentioned you run 5 different companies. How similar are the company cultures between them? Are they different? Is there a commonality between them, or anything specifically unusual about any of them from a cultural standpoint?
It's interesting. Gosh, you're a good interviewer, because I've never, ever been asked that question. I've been asked if they're similar, but to specifically ask about culture, I'd say that culturally they're very similar in that it's a culture where numbers are king,
right? And
so KPIs are king.
Yeah, we certainly know that. Yeah,
KPIs matter. We celebrate our successes, and when things aren't going well and we're we don't have a reason to celebrate, then we talk about it, and we make sure that we understand when we're not meeting the numbers. It's always a culture of hard work. I believe very much that not only success but also happiness comes from working hard. And so I like to keep my team always in an upward movement, where they're always trying to get to that next stage in life and in business and in their job, so that they're trying to grow. And so I think you see that culture throughout all my companies. And the businesses have nothing in common. The data security company and All Green Recycling have some commonality, but other than that, the other businesses are have nothing to do with it. I have one in the medical industry. I have a photography, videography studio. I have and film production company. And then I have a digital marketing, search engine optimization company. And then my business consulting and things like that. So they're very much unrelated to one another, but the way that they're managed is extremely similar, and their cultures are a lot alike.
What do you look for when you're making bets on the people you invest in, whether it's hiring new folks or perhaps promoting them within some of these companies? Because I'm sure you're involved in some of that as well.
Absolutely. My number one rule in hiring people is I hire people who I think are going to be able to be promoted. If I'm trying to hire, let's say, a line level employee, I don't interview them for a line level employee job. I interview them as if I'm interviewing the lead of the department.
Right.
And I see, can they be the lead, right, with the right guidance and the right experience? And if they can, that's who I want to go for. Now, if I'm interviewing a lead, I want to see, can they be a supervisor? If there's, if it's a supervisor, can they be a manager? Can a manager be a director? If I'm hiring someone at the highest level of the company, are they capable of replacing me one day? Because if they're not, that's probably not the right person to be putting into that position. And I make that very clear to them, that as I bring them in, I say, look, this is what I'm bringing you in for, is I want you to want to grow. And some people, you'll see on their face during the interview, they'll essentially look at you and say, well, I don't want to grow. I kind of like, doing this. And that they're not going to be the right fit under my system.
Will you pass on those people?
I absolutely do. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes it's hard because you have good people that could do a job really well.
Right.
But I've realized that for me, that pipeline is much more important because and I do demand a lot of people. So the only way you're going to put up with all the things I'm going to demand of you as an employee is if you so badly want to grow that you're willing to do whatever it takes.
Right.
And so and enjoy the process, and they do.
Well, you've been very generous with your time. A couple last questions, though. You had mentioned a little earlier on, and I think also when we spoke a few weeks back, you've got these 5 businesses, but you're really focusing now on the coaching and kind of sharing your learning. Tell us a little bit about your motivations and kind of transitioning from those businesses, many of which, of course, you ran and made them successful before you kind of stepped on to the next one. But why kind of now move to more of the coaching and sharing your learnings with others?
Absolutely. It's for me, I've become a serial entrepreneur. And so while I own 6 companies today, I've started a total of 12 over my career, including restaurants and all sorts of stuff that has nothing to do with any of my current industries. And so what I realize is what makes me get up early in the morning. Like this morning, I got up at about 3:45 in the morning. What gets me up in the morning is knowing that there's a challenge ahead of me. And I like change. I like new things. Some people like things to be the same. I have a daughter who's like that, and she just likes things to be exactly the same. And I'm not one of those people. Same bothers me. And so what I found in my own companies is I would first get excited and I would start fixing things, and I'd make them better and make improvements. And at one point I'd hit a point where really things were going pretty well.
Yeah.
And when there were no problems, I would lose interest and either have a hard time getting myself to show up to work
motivated,
every day,
Yeah.
or I'd start breaking things. Now, I didn't
just
do
so
it.
You could fix them again, right?
I didn't do it consciously knowing I was breaking things, but
sure.
subconsciously something would get me to make these changes that maybe weren't the best decisions. And so at one point I realized, gosh, I've started so many of my own companies. And I got into a couple situations where I was helping others, but really at heart, I'm a teacher. And I'm better at going in, doing something short term with a massive impact. And so I decided that that's the direction I was going to go. And I was fortunate that a few CEOs trusted me, and I went in and I advised them. And so I've now got this incredible honor to be able to act as a coach for some business owners, as an advisor to some really amazing CEOs. And then in some cases I go in and I act as an interim CEO or a part-time CEO, or I'll take on a specific project within a company. And when I go into something, I never want to plan to be in it more than 3 to 6 months. Now some of my coaching clients and where I'm an advisor, they've had me for years, but it's not that that we're still working on the same things. It's just that they enjoy working with me, and so we've continued to work together. But I love getting into something, 3 months, 6 months, fixing it, making incredible progress, and then handing it off to other people and leaving them with the systems so that they can get the same results and better that I was getting, but without me physically having to be there.
Do you still have your eyes on looking at starting up new businesses, or have you kind of put that on hold for a while?
I don't know that I would be interested in starting up any of my own new businesses these days. But I have considered a few different opportunities that have come my way, where it's been young startups who want me to come in and be a partner and sort of be that CEO. But it's a very, very early startup stage.
Sure.
I've considered some of those. But for the most part, I'm really enjoying where I'm at.
Yeah, sounds like you're very passionate about it.
I am. Yeah. It's just it's incredible to be able to take all the experience that I have and get results, because these days when I go into a company, I can get such incredible results in such a short time, because I go in day one and they have a sales team and they don't have proper KPIs like daily, weekly, monthly coming to them actively, that'll be in a KPI dashboard somewhere, which means nothing, right? And I make that change, and almost immediately you see massive changes and increases in sales. And it's exciting to see. By the way, the same applies to operations. It's no different. I use sales as an example, but it works in every area.
Awesome. Last question. You've been so generous. What career and life advice would you give to someone that has their eyes on their own corner office, or perhaps wants to become a serial entrepreneur like yourself?
I think that the first part of it, if someone wants that corner office, I think the key is to understand what it is that the people who make the decisions of when you get that corner office understand what exactly they want. And some of them may not be so good at conveying that to you, right? So understand in no uncertain terms, what are the expectations? And it may require you to schedule meetings with them. It may require you to, buy them lunch or dinner or drinks or something, but you want to sort of pry it out of them. And sort of, tell them why. Tell them you want to be an incredibly exceptional employee, and that you want to know exactly what they expect, because without those expectations, you may be an amazing employee, doing all the stuff that you want, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're getting what they want. Right. And then the other thing is know that it's going to be hard work. At the end of the day, it comes down to working hard. Now, when I say hard work, I don't mean just labor or number of hours. One of the biggest things about hard work is actually working intelligently, such as doing the important things before you do the urgent things. Right. Instead of coming into the office every day and putting out 20 fires, you may have to let 3 or 4 of those fires just burn, and hopefully they don't burn down the building. But then go knock out 2 or 3 things that have absolutely no urgency on your calendar, right? Things that are extremely important, right? They're those big picture things. Go after those things and knock out 1 of those every day, 2 of those every day, because in the long term, it's those important things that are not yet urgent that are going to stop those urgent things from coming up later. And that's what I mean by hard work. Sometimes it's hard because you're putting in the hours, but sometimes it's hard work because you're not getting to do what you want to do, right, but you're doing the things that are going to give you the best results.
Arman Sadeghi, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.